Hey traders, welcome to the final monthly watch list for the year. Starting with the DXY all the way back on the weeklies, we can see we are well on track to go and break the lows at around about 88 over the next few months, heading into the start of 2021. And as you can see throughout the year, our picture of this trade has played out pretty much on par with exactly what we were expecting. And at the moment, I still feel we have a little bit of a dollar rally left in the charts. I still think what we're going to see here is an ABC corrective structure, a little running flat, push up towards kind of 93, that 93 region. If we look for the full target on the ABC, the C wave should get up to around about 93 to 93.50, somewhere in that region before we see a turnaround and a continuation of that dollar weakness. I don't know what's going to cause us, potentially a little bit of a break in the stimulus talks, which could lead to a little bit of a dollar rally because the market has already priced in basically the stimulus package. Maybe it's a buy the rumor, sell the fat scenario. Whatever it is, I still see a little dollar rally heading in towards the end of the year and into the beginning of next year. So quite a clean little ABC corrective structure for me. It's not as clean on the DXY and the euro as it is on the pound, but the pound is a good indicator for what we can expect from these markets. So as you can see, over the last few hours, especially the start of this week, we're starting to see a little bit of a rally off these lows, which is looking really bullish for potential move all the way up. So we can look for those long dollar trades as of today. If we go into the euro, we will see a very similar picture where we can start to look for these short euro trades. If you zoom all the way in, you can see we're just starting to see that turn to the upside. And even if you want to go into a classical point of view, there's a little bit of a head and shoulders that's formed here. So very interesting to see. And we should see a turn now. It's taken a little bit longer than we expected, but we're definitely starting to see that turn to the downside. And as you can see, we have a nice A, B, C corrective structure, nice running flat for continuation. And if we look at the length of the correction, I believe we are correcting this impulse. And we are starting to see that move now cross over the length of correction we need, which is really cool, really good to see, and some really good trading ahead over the next few months. We're seeing the same in the pound. As you can see, a nice big bearish candle forming, really leading the way in this move back down towards the lows at 126, somewhere at 126.70, somewhere in that region. So we should see that. And if we're going to break the lows, because as you can see, we broke the highs going into a nice running flat. So we should at least go test 127 on this, down below 128 before we see a turn to the upside. Potentially might be quite a choppy move. As you can see, A wave quite straightforward, B wave or C wave might be a potentially choppy move down. Going over to the Aussie, if you guys remember, we were we were looking at the Aussie as a kind of expanding running flat with the potential for continuation. And I'm just taking a look at what we're seeing in the euro and the pound. It's hard to think that the Aussie is not going to take some of this in terms of a pullback in the structure. So I'm leaning towards a potential structure, just a possibility. I'm not really going to define this just yet as a certainty, but the potentiality that what we're seeing here is an A wave down, a B wave up, and a C wave down, all the way back down to 0.70, somewhere in that region moving forward. So we just have to keep an eye on that as a potentiality for the Aussie. If we zoom in, we'll see at the very least the lower time frame suggests a pullback towards 73. So if you start to see the short Aussie trade, it's a possibility for you to take for a hold all the way down to 0.70. But in reality, the better trade is the pound, potentially the euro. The pound is the top of the notch, in my opinion. So just something to keep an eye on over the next couple of months. New Zealand dollar, US dollar, we zoom out, you'll see a similar picture where potentially what we're looking at is that as your A wave down. This is your choppy B wave, and we'll see a C wave drop down below 68 if this isn't the case. Just in case that is a scenario that plays out, we just need to be aware of it. Obviously, only time will tell. We zoom in to the lower time frames, we'll see a similar picture where we are sort of waiting for this pullback, even though we never got much of a crossover. We might even see this as an A wave and all of this as an impulse up. So it's a bit tricky, some tricky trading ahead on these pairs. That's why I prefer to focus on the pound. US dollar CAD, a little bit cleaner. As you can see, impulse up, fairly choppy VWAP down, strong finish, very overbought or oversold at this region, and we should see a nice push up from here, at least up towards 130, and that'll give us a nice running flat for continuation to the downside. So I like the the CAD trade as well, better than the Oz and New Zealand. You can see the structure is much cleaner. US dollar Swiss, also like this structure, starting to see a turn on the on the lows as well, very oversold, and the structure is really clean for a push up towards around about 91, 92, somewhere 91.50, 92, somewhere in that region. So another clean buy potential on this trade. And if we look at the A wave, it's quite choppy, so we might see quite a strong move in the US dollar against the Swiss. If we go on to the lower time frames, you can really start to see a bottoming pattern occurring here. Again, we're seeing this little inverse head and shoulders, excuse me, wrong thing, inverse head and shoulders forming, which could potentially be the start of quite a nice big move to the upside. So keeping an eye on that for a turn and a potential trade. US dollar yen, zoomed out. You can see the choppy kind of price action still remains. I still think we have an impulse down ABC, and we should see continuation all the way down towards 98.60. Which is a really interesting area for us in terms of our overall market thesis. We'll be keeping a close eye on that. If we zoom in on the lower time frames, it's really, really choppy price action. It's really tough to distinguish exactly what we're looking at. If the dollar's going to rally against pretty much everything else, I don't see why it wouldn't rally against something like the yen, in which case I'm starting to think that what we're going to see is more of this being a kind of complex flat pattern somewhere along these lines, where we have that as your middle pattern, maybe a drop down there first before we see the turn, or maybe this is the low and that was your internal structure, probably something like that. Impulse down, ABC, impulse down, all of that is your B wave, and now we're waiting for our C wave up, which could lead to a strong push up from there. I'm not so keen on the US dollar yen buy, but the US dollar yen sell could be really good as we see a push down below 100 from around about the 107 region. So we'll be keeping a close eye on that, adding that to the watch list. Silver still kind of chopping around, staying out of our kind of still remains in no man's land, waiting for a move down to this region. It's hard to say this is the buy area. It's hard to say what we're looking at is an actual structure of any kind. This is a real mess. So I'm on the sidelines for silver for now. Gold is a little bit clearer. We have a nice A wave down, ABC middle corrective structure, and a C wave down. And now we're waiting to see, are we going to see one more test of these lows, maybe a move down towards 1700 as gold or as the dollar rallies, or is gold rallying part of that risk off rally and we're looking for a lower degree corrective structure here? If we go into the hourly, I want to wait for a really good corrective structure on this one. And we haven't seen anything of the kind just yet. So patiently waiting for something along these lines to correct, to buy to the upside, or we're just going to see this fall to the downside from here. And potentially this is a little corrective structure, which one of our students pointed out. I'm not so keen on that. If you take a look on the hourlies, it doesn't really look like a corrective structure at all, but there's still that possibility. I still somehow feel for some reason that we're still going to go down from here, but we're patiently waiting to see where to from here. Gold silver ratio, always important, keeping a close eye on this for a turn to the upside, which means the end of our global thesis. Really interesting price action with the impulse of the lows and a corrective structure forming, which is a concern, especially when we look at copper rallying way up above its full target highs on the weekly. So something to keep an eye on. I still think it's a little bit early. I still think we might see just a slow copper market, slow gold and silver ratio market, while some of the other pairs catch up. Something like palladium, I still see as having a little bit of downside to come, and then a strong rally. And I still think platinum has a little bit of a dip to come forming a nice big running flat, something along these lines. And then we will see a nice push to the upside. That's a nice running flat or push up towards its at least the minimum targets at 130, As you can see, ABC, we need to see platinum get up to these regions before we see the turn to the downside from there. So keeping a close eye on those things as our global thesis of reflation comes to an end and we move towards the next phase. EURAUD looking for downside. As you can see, nice impulse down, A, B, C, D, E. This is why we had such an issue charting this corrective structure. As you can see, it's become a bit of an expanding triangle, which is really difficult to trade. Now we've seen a nice push off those highs. We've gone into a little bit of a running flat on the lower time frames, or expanding flat, more like on the lower time frames. So now we're looking for a turn to the downside on the EURAUD, which could be a really nice trade. And may explain why the Oz is looking so strong against the dollar in comparison to the other pairs. So we'll be keeping a close eye on that, looking for that turn, looking for the trade. If we go into the lower time frames, potentially seeing that classic topping pattern, which is interesting, but I just think it's a little bit too early to get into this trade, as we might see one more up to break the highs. So I'm waiting patiently for something tradable. But in the meantime, you can just put an entry order below these lows, stop loss above these highs. That's kind of the wider version of the trade. The risk reward is still really good, and we should see the Aussie really perform strongly against the euro moving forward, as we see Oz strongly against some of the other pairs too, like the pound especially. EURAUD, still nothing clear about this trade. I'm still kind of staying on the sidelines of this one. At best, my best possibility that we're seeing here is a flat pattern, contracting flat that has turned to the upside. Otherwise, there's still more downside to come in the EURAUD. I'm staying out of this one. There's nothing clear in it. Euro Swiss, kind of the same thing. Although we are rallying nicely off the lows, we have to look at this as a contracting flat, which is always difficult and can only ever be confirmed once we break these highs. So again, difficult trading conditions for some of these pairs, and we have to just sit on the sidelines, sadly, waiting for a better opportunity, because there's always the possibility this goes and breaks the lows, or is giving us more of a triangle than a flat pattern. So if we see a nice dip towards 107.5, I'll be more interested in putting entry order above these highs. If we zoom out, we're still looking at a very clean structure in terms of a move to the upside. We have a strong impulse up, nice big corrective structure, A, B, C, D, E, and then a push up towards perhaps 1.12 as a high. So very interesting trade if we can find an entry, but difficult conditions. Euro pound looking like it's starting to rally. As you know, we were looking for this as an A, B, C, D, E corrective structure. We were looking for a break of these lows, which we got. And now we're starting to see that push up towards 95, which is a really good looking trade if you can find it. But it's not my favorite, considering the other pairs are looking much stronger, the other cross pairs. So I'm staying out of this for now. And I'm going to hold to my trading plan, which was to wait for it to get up to here and then look for the short of the C wave to the downside. So keeping a close eye on that as a potential short heading into the new year, but nothing on the list for now. Euro yen, still chopping around. I still think we're going to see some sideways choppy price action. I still think we're in a B wave at the moment. I still think we're going to chop up towards there and then pull back. If we look at the structure, it just makes the most sense to me. Obviously, there's a possibility that what we're looking at here is a running flat. And now we are impulsing to the upside. But trading conditions have been difficult. We did say take this breakout, which we did, but then we saw a pullback, got taken out for break even, and then saw another push up. Haven't really seen a decent entry order since then. Possibility, which has been a little bit challenging. There was potentially this little running flat in here, which could have been taken to the upside, but it wasn't very clear. Obviously, this would have been a perfect flag to take with really nice results, but it wasn't very clean and clear to me as to what we were looking at. So patiently waiting for something better and to see how things play out. Like I said, there's better charts out there. Keeping it on the watch list just for interest's sake, because there is some good trading to come. But for now, I'm on the sidelines. As you know, we are trading this as a potential move up, which obviously gives you quite a lot of upside to come on this trade if you can find an entry order to the long, to the upside. So that's why it's on the watch list. Euro New Zealand, very similar to Euro Oz, except I'm still looking for a little bit of a push higher here. As you can see, the lower time frames, the 4 hour, we have a very clean corrective structure. We started to see a strong push up. I did say it's worth taking this break to the upside, and we are seeing a nice push off those lows. My only concern is this becomes a bit of a flat pattern and we see a turn to the downside. So just something to keep an eye on if you are trading this. There was a little bit of a corrective move in here that was tradable, a bit of an expanding triangle in the middle of an ABC running flat. And you could have taken that to the upside. Just be cautious now. If you did take that, you want to take break even if it comes down there. But if you can manage, if it does manage to push higher, you've got a nice trade up towards 180, which is a really clean trade. Kind of counter to Euro Oz, which is interesting though. So that's why I'm not too sold on the position. So interesting times ahead, definitely worth watching. Pound Oz taking forever to play out, but finally we're starting to see some downside momentum today. And I think we should see this push down towards these lows at 1748, call it 1750. And then we should see a rally from there and then another fall as this expanding triangle plays out. So should be a nice trade down towards here. I'm going to take profits in this region, wait for a rally and then get in again for this move. I don't really want to hold this rally. Although we'll see how it plays out, see how deep this this D wave goes down. So yeah, be patient with it. Pound CAD remains a choppy mess, staying out of this one. Triangle is still there. We've seen a strong move down from there, but just really confusing. So I'm staying out of that for now. Pound Swiss, really challenging conditions on this. As you can see, Pound Swiss really turning strongly to the downside following the bearish Pound Swiss move. Just really challenging conditions at the moment. The higher time frame really looks like it wants to push higher, and yet on the lower time frame we're seeing some really bearish price action and some really choppy, confusing price action as well. So patiently waiting for better price action. I took this trade to the upside, got some nice upside, and then ended up getting taken out for break even, and now we're pushing down even further, which is interesting. So I'm on the sidelines of this one. I'm actually going to take it off the watch list just because it is such a mess, and we'll wait and see what comes out of it over the coming weeks. Pound yen, similar scenario, seeing a strong push down pound yen, but there's always a possibility that what we are looking at is an A, B, C, D, E running triangle or a flat pattern at some point. So just waiting to see how this develops as well, because it's been such a choppy mess, really challenging conditions to trade. Pound New Zealand, similar picture to the euro, where we're kind of expecting a little bit of a push higher at some point, either to see this push up to give us an internal ABC, and then another push down, and then another push up, and this all becomes an ABC corrective pattern, or we're just pushing down here. This zigzag was the central pattern, and now we're going to see that C wave up towards that 200 region, 2.00 region. So yeah, kind of just waiting to see how this plays out, but interestingly watching. As you can see, we had quite a nice push up. It looked like we wanted to go, and over the last few hours, we've just seen a straight line down. So waiting to see how this resolves itself. Potentially, this is just the final move down to break these lows, and then we'll see a turn to the upside. So we'll be keeping an eye on that one as a potential trade, but I actually much prefer the Euro New Zealand. So I'd prefer to trade the Euro New Zealand given the price action that we're seeing in the weak pound. Aussie dollar CAD, kind of still a mess. Very, very messy price action. Looking for an ABCDE. Was hoping to see a break of these highs before we see a turn to the downside. I still think that's a possibility. This might just be a lower degree running flat for more upside before we see this turn to the downside. But really, there's nothing in it for me there. Aussie Swiss, really interesting. As you know, we were looking for the end of the structure, push up. This is the first lower degree corrective structure. It's been really clean, pushed into this region, pushed up, and now we've chopped back down. So a good chance to go break the lows, and we're still waiting to see this push up off the lows to the upside. Definitely looking for the long trade. Interesting to see a little bit of a trend line forming here, which will be of interest to break to the upside. But I'd really like to see these lows broken first to confirm upside. Obviously, there's a potential that this was your first move up. What we've seen is an A, B, C, D, E on the lower time frames, and this is another potential move to start the upside move. So we keep an eye on that. But basically, you probably want to trade any break of this, conservatively speaking, an inch short above these highs and a stop below these lows is, in my opinion, a nice trade and definitely worth taking. And that will be my strategy with this one. Aussie dollar yen, also an absolute mess. Still expecting an ABCDE corrective structure, potentially a move down towards 76, and that could be a nice buy as well. Not as nice as the Aussie dollar Swiss. Obviously, expanding triangle is always difficult to trade, but the upside from there should be really nice. So also a nice trade to keep an eye on. Oz New Zealand, zoomed out, it's a bit of a mess because what we're seeing is a very strong impulse off those highs. And if we zoom out to the weekly, you can see that what we were looking at here is an A wave up, A, B, C, D, or whatever it is in the middle to give us our B wave, and then a C wave up. And if we look at the numbers of that C wave, you see it's done enough and could be potentially called a contracting flat. And now we're starting to see an impulse to the downside. So potentially the Aussie is weakening against New Zealand dollar and should go break the lows at basically parity. But we're keeping a close eye on that because this is potentially also a corrective move, maybe just a corrective zigzag type correction where this is your internal structure. A wave down, ABC, A wave down. And now we could see a push up towards the lows, and that's what we're starting to see. We're starting to see a strong impulse there. So kind of a picture of two stories. Have to wait and see. The only confirmation we'll get now is waiting for a decent corrective structure on the lower time frames. Something along these lines to trade long Aussie dollar, New Zealand dollar back up to the highs, which could be a really nice trade given how far we've fallen. So let's just see how it plays out. I will put it on the list because it's a decent trade. New Zealand dollar yen, similar scenario, looking for this to turn into a bit of a running flat and starting to see that downside. So look for this to push down below the lows or the beginning of the correction at 72.80 and a nice push down from there somewhere into that region, and that would be a nice buy in New Zealand dollar yen. As you can see, impulse, ABC, impulse, lower degree correction, impulse, lower degree correction, another impulse up. Not the best long-term trade, but a nice short-term trade to the upside. Swiss yen, really messy, confusing price action that we've seen here because as you can see, it's all very impulsive. Impulse up, impulse down, impulse up, impulse down, impulse up. So in terms of figuring out what we're looking at, I like to think we've topped out here and we're seeing a move down towards the lows. This is our A wave, and we're seeing this as our B wave down, push towards the lows. Just to confirm, this would be your A. This is an A, B, C, and now you're seeing the C of B down towards 100 before you see a push back up. So that's what I've been looking for a long time now. But in terms of finding the structure as to how to trade this, it's been an absolute mess. We started to see a nice push off the highs. I thought this was the beginning of the move. We had a nice A wave correction, looking for a choppy B, but we just started impulsing. So I don't think this is a B wave if you really look at it, which is a little bit confusing. So we're just kind of patiently waiting to see how this develops. Potentially, what you could look at this as is, I guess, an expanding triangle of some kind, where this is your A wave, B, C, D, E, but it's very unusual. So yeah, patiently waiting for a clearer picture to emerge, but short bias is definitely on the cards. US oil, very bullish still. Oil, looking at the correction, I'm just going to go to UK oil because it's a much cleaner chart. I still think we're looking at an ABC expand triangle pushing up. As you can see, ABC running flat. That's what we were looking for. That's what we got. And we've seen a strong impulse over there. Seeing a little bit of a corrective move here, but we should continue to see oil pushing up from here. A little bit of weird price action in here. So how we're going to interpret it is a little bit challenging. But I still have a long bias to this. Prefer to trade this in terms of options. But expecting oil to get up towards that $60 region. So it's been challenging, not as clean as the first move, which is, I guess, kind of expected. Now we just have to see what we're getting out of this price action here. As you can see, 4 hour, no crossovers. So this is all one big move at the moment on the 4 hour. Nothing to say we couldn't just get continuation though. So patiently waiting to see how things develop here, if we can get a clearer picture as to what's happening in this region. SPX, I still think we're going to see a pullback. It's been long, slow chop, but that's what the S&P does. Just chops higher, chops higher, chops higher, and then all of a sudden we see a big move to the downside. And I think we're starting to see a start of that now if we see what the currencies are doing. So this could be the start of the move down, in my view. So keep an eye on this. A break of that would be interesting. As you know, we don't really trade trend lines, so just saying that as a matter of opinion. But if we see a move down and a decent looking correction, potentially this little flag was an ideal trade, which is playing off really nicely now. Could potentially still be taken at a low risk because there's always the possibility we continue to chop higher before we see the move. But if you look at the higher time frames, we're starting to see this little bit of a rising wedge kind of play itself out. Something like that. MACD divergence falling to the downside. So there's a couple of things that look like we've turned, including currencies. So I like this trade to the downside. And I really like the long trade from there to follow. NASDAQ, still staying on the sidelines for NASDAQ. I still don't like it. I still think what we're looking at is an impulse up, A, B, C, D, E. We'll see another pull down from here. That's going to be part of the risk off move. That's going to be a central triangular pattern. Then we'll see a push up from there, back up towards kind of 136, maybe 1400. Then we'll see another big fall from there. And all of that is going to be one big long corrective structure. So some good short-term trading available, but long-term, it's going to be very choppy price action moving forward. So not my favorite. Individual tech is also looking really choppy, following a similar scenario, especially the big five, but expect this kind of price action moving forward. That's my view at least. And obviously we're early days here. This could develop into something way more complex. Something like that becomes a flat pattern. Then you get a push up, then a push down, then a push up, then a push down. It just becomes way more complex. So we have to just be patient with this and wait for it to play out. US 30, the Russell, it's come a long way. Sorry, this is the Dow. Come a long way also without a corrective move. So I'm looking for another pullback, kind of along the lines of the S&P, and then this will give you a nice running flat for continuation to the upside. US Russell has come a long way without a correction. So I expect this to fall off and just start to turn into a bigger correction, because that's one long big impulse. Very hard to look at this as a running flat given the angle of the move. It's possible if you want to look at it that way, but I don't like it. Look at it that way. So I prefer to trade something like the S&P once we see the fall, rather than trying to trade this as a running flat and then get long here because of this momentum that we've seen already. So You're trying to squeeze a fairly dry lemon over here, whereas the S&P looks like it's ready to take another leg higher. DAX, still expecting a little push down for all of this to be corrective. We've got a little bit of a push. I suspect a little bit more downside, and probably this is going to look like an expanding triangle once you're done. So expect to go and break these lows before we see a turn to the upside. The Euro stocks is a similar scenario, but not as much of an expanding, so it doesn't have to go break these lows. I just think it's a running flat, but a nice buy the dip opportunity in Euro stocks. UK has performed really well for us, pushed up and should continue to push up, especially if the currency starts to look weak. I'm still holding my call options there. Aussie has looked really good. I think this correction is complete. We're now in a lower degree corrective structure. I think what we're seeing now is this move down, and this is a really nice running flat. This is one of the better trades we have to trade Aussie equities to the upside from here. Upside target, as you can see, is like 7136 up towards 7500. So a nice trade available in Aussie stocks. Nikkei, we wanted to see a little bit of a pullback, but it seems like that didn't happen. Are we going to see it still? It's obviously still a potential. If we see a deeper pullback down towards 2400, I'm still possibly calling that a running flat, but it's not the cleanest structure ever. So I would have to actually look at this as more along the lines of maybe a triangle that is completed, and we're seeing upside from here. And we're just going to see a lower degree correction and then push up again. Higher time frame, you can see if we go all the way back, probably to the monthlies, we should see this continue to march up from here back towards the highs at 40,000. So that's a longer term view that we're looking at. We had a nice running flat that we saw with the Corona pullback, and we just see continuation to the upside from here. Nifty, pretty much a similar scenario, looking at all of this as a nice big monthly running flat and just pushing up from there. So really like Nifty, emerging markets, equities doing really well. We were looking for a pullback, just didn't seem to happen. Possible that it comes now and all of this becomes a running flat. This is much cleaner than the Nikkei and a good potential. It's also possible that what we saw was one big running flat here, and now you're just seeing continuation to the upside. So not the cleanest price action ever, but you are looking for opportunities to get long if you do find them. Shanghai Composite, breaking out of a triangle. However, I think this is actually just going to be a bit more of a complex running flat. Impulse down, impulse up, choppy move down, impulse up, impulse down, and then that becomes a big complex flat pattern to trade to the upside. This is my favorite emerging markets. If you can get a buy in this 3200 region, you should get a really nice push up from there. Emerging markets looking really good. As you can see, if we zoom out to the monthly, emerging markets look like they've completed either a triangle or a contracting flat, and we've just seen a really strong impulse, and we should see this continue to push up from there. Skip. US dollar ZAR as one of the emerging market currencies still looks really good to me. Again, a little bit of a US dollar sell-off up and towards 1580, and then continuation dollar weakness either to 1455 or all the way down to 1380. US dollar, Singapore dollar, similar scenario, impulse up towards 134, push down from there. If you go to the weeklies, you can see how these trades are in the end, towards the end of their C wave, which, like we said, we're starting to see that turn in narrative of our global reflation trade. But I think we've still got about 3 months to go in that. US dollar, Mexican, same thing, A, B, C. This has completed its full wave. Expect this to actually move all the way down back towards these lows as a kind of expanding flat before we see a push and the dollar change in sentiment. Lower time frame, same thing. Still waiting for this move up, and then continuation to the downside. All of that a nice big running flat. Into the cryptos, Bitcoin. Zooming in, you'll see what we're looking at. Impulse down, impulse up, impulse down, choppy move, impulse down, impulse up, which we're in now, up towards 1900, 20,000, somewhere there, 19,000, 20,000, or 19,900, sorry, 20,000, somewhere in that region. Then another pullback to match this one. And then continuation to the upside. Nice running flat for another leg higher in Bitcoin up towards probably 22,000 in that area, 21 to 22,000. Zoomed out, you can see what we're looking at is impulse down, impulse up, choppy corrected price action, impulse up. I think that's your B wave, and we still have a C wave down towards, I think, probably the 9 to 10,000 region is going to be the lows of our C wave. So I think a big pullback is on its way. I think it's too early for that, but that's part of the shift in narrative towards dollar strength. If you're wondering what this is actually Bitcoin priced in oil. Not that it has any significance in terms of how they relate to each other. There is maybe some significance in terms of the global reflation trade of some kind, but from a technical point of view, this is exactly what I expect Bitcoin to do moving forward. As you can see, we look at a long drawn out A wave. That's exactly what we got on Bitcoin. Big push up, choppy corrected price action down, choppy corrected price action down, another big push up. And I expect that's what Bitcoin's going to do with another big blowout top up towards probably 30,000, somewhere, maybe 28, somewhere in that region. And then, as you can see, big pullback from there. So I think that's what's going to be our push down towards that 10,000 region, and then continuation to the upside from there. So interesting to see that kind of chart that we're seeing mirroring so well. Ethereum, US dollar, still good upside on this one, I think. As you can see, ABC. This hasn't played out in terms of length of correction, in terms of what I would want to see. But if you go into lower time frames, I still think there's a nice trade available to you in Ethereum once we see this corrective structure complete itself. Potentially has already completed itself. If we're starting to see kind of alt season take over, we have to look at that as a contracting flat. Then we'd see a push up, which means this is a potentially lower degree corrective structure. And then you'd want to trade this to the upside. Obviously, this could all develop into something a little bit more complex, and we see another push down towards 54, 540, 560, somewhere there, and then see upside. So it's a little bit of a mess, but I remain bullish. Ethereum, XRP, I'm not sold on XRP. I think XRP may have topped out at 80. That's my view. If we zoom out to say the 8 hour, and we look at the structure we've been looking at, so we zoom in, something like that, then you can see how this is a complete structure. A wave all the way back in 2018, long drawn out B wave down towards the lows at 10.10, breaking these lows and then pushing up towards the highs with alternation, pushing up. That's a big A, B, C. I need to get rid of that. That's wrong. A, B, C. And now we're seeing continuation towards the lows. That's my view of what we've seen, which means we probably have topped out here. Obviously, we could still see a little bit more upside and then see the fall. But if you look at the price action, what we've seen is strong impulse off the lows, fairly strong impulse off the highs, fairly strong impulse off the lows, and now we're seeing choppy corrective price action. So what I think is going to happen is a chop down towards kind of 45.45, one last rally, and then continuation to the downside from there. So let's see if that plays out. Early days, obviously, we wait to see for that long corrective price action before we can get any clarity. And that's about it. Finally, I just want to go to Bitcoin priced in gold to show you the structure also matches where we're going to see gold start to outperform Bitcoin. We were looking for this section up here where Bitcoin is going to outperform gold. We've gone to break those highs. we could potentially go all the way up towards here, and that becomes your structure, and then we see this pullback from there. But like I said, I expect a big dip in Bitcoin moving forward, and that's something you need to keep an eye on, especially with all the bullish price action. I still think it's early, like I've said. I still think there's time to come for a little bit more upside in Bitcoin, but I still think we're going to see a big dip in Bitcoin moving forward, and that kind of matches, like I said, the shift in the narrative from reflation back towards dollar strength. Which is probably, in my view, an inflationary environment where the Fed has to start hiking rates. But I may be mistaken in the fundamentals, but the charts are saying dollar strength moving forward. It's cool, guys. That's it. Enjoy your December. Enjoy your festive season. Some interesting trades on the charts. Definitely, I don't think we're going to have such a quiet festive season. I think we're going to see the euro chop down. But maybe that's part of it. Maybe the choppiness of this move is related to a quiet trading season. That's why it takes its time to get down towards this 1.6, 1.7 region, probably 1.7. But yeah, look at the pound. The pound is moving. The pound is leading the way. And I expect the euro to follow. So enjoy your festive season, and we'll see you again next year.